I'm really glad you're here. I'm going to invite you while we wait to, I'm really glad you're here. I'm going to invite you while we wait to go into the chat box if you'd like and type up anything interesting or a funny experience or something you didn't know or don't know about composting. And I'm just going to give you a little idea. So one of my favorite memories in my very first compost bin, didn't really know what I was doing, was the day that my little schnauzer, she was the best catcher, little Rosie, and the kids would spit ice cubes into her mouth and she would catch it. Like she could catch anything, right? And she comes running into the house and was so excited to bring things to us with an entire stalk of broccoli, kind of rotted and covered in insects, and was so excited and ran into the house and shook her head, and we couldn't get it out of her mouth, and she's running all over the house with it. So that's the kind of story, if anyone has a story like that they would like to share.
I can share I have two. Owning a compost company, I have quite a few stories of dealing, and it's always the really gross in the moment stories that make for the funny ones later, just like gross broccoli. So my husband and I started Compost Collective a few years ago, and food waste is the smelliest of all of the waste, I think. And we kind of gotten the hang of it, like our noses were getting adjusted. And there was one bucket that I will still never forget, and it was years ago. And it was corn cobs and crawdads, and we still reference that of like, no smell is as bad as corn cobs and crawdads. We opened this bucket up and we're just, oh God, so awful. So now I feel like that we have a scale of like, is it like a nice fresh smell on a scale of 1 to, it's like not 1 to 10. It's like a nice floral scent, or is it corn cobs and crawdads? the range. And my second story is, this was actually just a couple of months ago. We changed some of the systems up and how we were collecting, and it meant actually getting into the back of the truck and like shoveling with your hands the food waste into something. And it's in the moment, you're not really thinking about it. Like, you know that it's gross, but you don't really want to think too much about it. And we'd done everything we needed to do. I was about to get into our car to go home. And I realized, I looked down and I had maggots all over, on my arms, on my hand, like I had gloves on that I was taking off, and on my hands, on my shoes. And you just have to, do one of those mental checks where you go, okay, this is where we're at. I need to take care of this situation before I get into the car and bring this home to my family. And that's the joy and glamorous life of owning a compost business.
And here's what I see as the title of your first book. Corn cobs and crawdads. It's alliterative, right? It's catchy. It's like,
yeah, we actually are like, if we had a chapter in a book of our lives, corn cobs and crawdads would be the title of this chapter of our life.
Oh, this is fun. Well, hi everybody. I'm so happy you're all here. We want to start off with a little bit of introduction. We'll go around the room, and if you have a compost story you'd like to share, great. If you have a question, if you're not sure why you're here today, but something about the words visionary activist called to you, or maybe you know Meredith and you just want to hear what pearls of wisdom are going to come out of her mouth, whatever brought you here today. I'm Sammy Aaron. I think I know most people here, not everybody, but I'm the founder of The Resilient Activist, and you all are the inaugural crew of our Visionary Activist program. So this is the first we're really making anything public about this, and there will be more. There'll be more stories, more input from people like Meredith, who just stepped in and said, yeah, I'm going to do it no matter what happens. So I just welcome you here today. And so I'm just going to kind of go around this circle here as I watch to see if anybody else joins us. So we had about 20 people sign up, so we'll see who comes. So let's see. I think I'll go to Ruth is in my circle there. So Ruth, if you'd like to unmute yourself and just tell us about you.
Is this what I get for being to the right of the teacher, huh?
That's right.
Proximity. I have tried composting unsuccessfully a number of times. So I'm hoping to, with joining the collective, Meredith, I think that I have spoken with you about getting set up, and I'm now moving to transporting my own to suburban because it's just me and I just don't accumulate that much. I don't think. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm throwing things away that I shouldn't be. But anyway, I think I met you at a library, Sammy. One time, a friend of mine brought me. We belong to Earth Corps, which is the green group at the United Methodist Church of the Resurrection.
Mm-hmm. Well, great, Ruth. I'm glad you're here. And I love hearing your story of having it at your heart. You want to compost, but just haven't quite figured out how and when and why and what and so on. So that's a great place to be in, kind of that unknown. Ann Melia, how about you?
Sure. I'm Ann Melia, and we've been composting for a long, long time in our backyard. And the first compost pile that we made was well over 20 years ago, probably maybe even 25. But it was open to the top, and we had a couple of dogs. And we didn't realize this one dog kept kind of getting sick and throwing up a lot. And then one day we caught her, and they were kind of funny because they were these chow dachshund mixes. So they had really stocky bodies, but really short legs. And so we didn't think she could get into it, but she managed to climb up and was like always eating things out of it. And we were like horrified because it was making her sick. So we had to figure out some way to cover it. And now we just have one that turns. We bought one that spins so that our dogs can never get into it. And also you get, if you're not careful, you can get other animals, little mice and things in there. So that's our compost story, that we kind of keep it covered and keep it spinning more often and do a better job of it than that first one.
Yeah, dogs and compost, it does smell really interesting. Really interesting. Thanks, Ann. Glad you're here. Hi, Peggy. How are you? Peggy Bell.
Hi. I'm good. Hope you're good too. I've been trying to compost for a lot of years, but not terribly successfully. For a long time, I had a 12-hour day job, and I just didn't go out after, I finally got home to spin the compost wheel. And so I always had hard stuff, and I don't know if that's of any value at all anywhere. It is under the compost bins each spring, and I start over. So, and then I had vermicompost for a long time, and that worked pretty well, except that I live in a tiny house, and with no way to keep the worms warm in the winter, I had to bring it in the house, and the smell just overcame us. So we gave up that. So I'm here to learn as much as anything, and then maybe learn some options, because like Ruth, I just have myself and my son living together, and we don't have a super lot of waste, food waste. So we're kind of not quite enough for pickups, and it takes a long time to go, to take the compost, to have enough compost to take to the various centers like the Suburban Lawn and Garden. So
Yeah.
that's my story.
I admire your tenacity and your learning experience, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that didn't work. Cool. Well, I'm glad you're with us today. David Mitchell, how about you?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, I don't have any compost story. I live in an apartment and, it just, I just try to reduce my footprint as much as I possibly can. And this was another way to do it. And as far as the smell goes, what I do is I take my compost, which is primarily banana peels, apple cores, coffee grounds, cantaloupe rinds. I put all that into Tupperware, plastic containers, and then I put them in the refrigerator. And then so when the day comes, the night before, with the bucket out, I just kind of put all that stuff in the bucket that night, and then just put it out on the curb. So there's no problem with smell or anything in my apartment. So that's the way I do it. But I think, if as a city, Kansas City could establish a citywide composting program, I have no doubt in my mind that there would be hundreds of thousands of people who would do it, and the savings of the carbon savings would be just all the benefits would be tremendous in a lot of ways. But I'm really grateful for Compost Collective. I really deeply appreciate what you guys do there. Meredith. So anyway,
Thanks.
just
Go ahead.
glad you're here.
David, that's what we like to hear, that you haven't had any compost stories with us, that you don't have any smell. So that's great. That's what we want to hear.
Well, and the creativity of, putting your compost and keeping it in the refrigerator so it doesn't generate smells. I know we keep ours in the freezer until I feel like walking out in the backyard. And I think people just learning, oh, you can do that, or what a good idea. And then also your connection to the bigger picture, obviously, right? Climate change and global warming and food waste. And it's part of a bigger story. So that's great. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Anna Grather, hi.
Hi, everyone. A couple of things. I've composted at a number of homes now. And one interesting challenge is what to do with your compost when you sell your house, because, I've always wondered, I can't take it with me. The moving company won't move it. And it's too much to spread on the ground, especially when you move in the winter, to leave. And so I've just left a little gift of a compost pile with the people that inherited the house. So I'm kind of curious what they thought of that. And then the last two places that I've worked have had a composting program. Kansas City University of Medicine and Biosciences, I was able to start a composting program for the university there. I'm hoping it's still going. And then at my current employer, I currently live in Colorado. They do composting commercially also. So up until COVID, then we had to switch things up. So hoping we will get back to it when we can reestablish the full dining and cafeteria.
Yeah. Wow. Good for you. That's a great history, especially from a corporate perspective. Yeah. And we've run into that with moving, but I just empty them out. I just take whatever's in there, composted or not, and I put it out in the garden and then cover it with leaves if it's really not composted yet. And then wash out the compost bins because I have the plastic ones and take them with me. But it is a big conundrum. Really, yeah. I hear you. Glad you're here, Anna.
Thank you.
Let's see, Kathy Miller.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, I have so many compost stories. Let's see if I can make them short. One would be that in a living community that my husband and I were part of for a number of years, we had vermiculture. I thought that was the coolest thing. I didn't know anything about it until then. And to see those little worms eat everything that we fed them, it's like, wow, amazing, really. And then we moved out to the country. And so we bought a compost bin that you could load from the top, you know, and it had a little door down at the bottom to get your stuff out. And we'd never lived in the country before. So, you know, we're putting our stuff in and we find out that the, you know, like it's toppled over at first. And it's like, oh no, somebody's, you know, trying to, okay, put it back up, put a brick on. No, anyway, we had a conversation with a raccoon for about 2 weeks while we figured out what we had to do. Like a big cement block, finally. We had to take it on and off every time we wanted to put stuff in there because otherwise it was, you know, it was a mess. But probably my best one now is living here in the city. And I hadn't been composting and feeling not good about that. But my friend Kay has a compost in her backyard and I see her a couple times a week. So now I just make, you know, my little compost in my Tupperware and take it over. And I feel so good when I do that. I mean, it's amazing. Like every time I do it, I say, oh, I feel so happy. I feel so happy putting my compost in. So, but my best trick was a couple of weeks ago, I was having dinner with her and another friend at her house. And so we always order in food. We've given up cooking. And so I took the compost, a couple of them, in a canvas bag and acted like that was our dinner for tonight. And so I gave them each a bag that had my plastic container of compost. And then they're saying, oh, what'd you bring? What'd you bring? And they opened it like, what? Anyway, it was very fun. Those are my stories.
Thank you, Kathy. You're so funny. Let's see, Toby, how about you?
I am Toby. I live in Overland Park near Johnson County Community College, and I have composted for years and years and years, maybe 20 years, 25 years. And what's weird about that for me is that I hadn't really gardened. So I've been producing all this compost, but not really knowing what to do with it. But composting just I'm like Kathy. I feel so good when if I'm producing waste in the kitchen that I have something good to do with it. And so I find it very fulfilling. Some stories that I have about composting. Well, I guess a couple of things. One is I used to do the freezer method where I'd have a container in the freezer, but now lately what we've been doing is using small paper bags since we're doing more carry out food in COVID. And so the small paper sacks, we just put whatever compost in there and then we put the entire paper sack into the compost bin. So we aren't having to empty things and we're doing it more frequently. So take the entire paper sack, put it out there and it's been really easy. So that's been a cool one. We get some, when we first built the compost here, we were getting animals that were not even necessarily eating the stuff that's in it, but just shredding it and spreading it across the yard. And so that wasn't going to work for us. So we have had a similar conversation like Kathleen, where we're like, okay, do we just need to put a top on it? No, they're going through the holes. Okay, let's put netting around, little fine netting around it so that they can't hit it. So now we have the top open, but netting all along the sides so that if the mammals get in, they can shred stuff up, and that's helpful, thank you. And then they have to jump out. They can't spread it everywhere from inside the bin. So that's where we're at with that. And then the final story is when my son was very little, we would be shoveling the complete compost into a wheelbarrow. And we learned, kind of like Meredith, where Meredith has this new terminology that has come out of compost. We have a similar thing where his shovel wasn't quite picking up as much soil and moving as much, the composted soil. So I had the magic. He's like 5 years old. So he thought I had the magic shovel because it was more effective than his shovel. So we switched shovels, and no, how come my shovel was still better even after we switched? So now he's an artist, and somehow he always has the magic pencil or pen or paintbrush, and mine never works quite as well as his does. So we have that in our language now of, wait a minute, you got the magic utensil.
I love that. And it goes back to composting. Cool. Thanks, Toby. Brenda, how about you?
We are fortunate in Lawrence that there is a yard waste pickup compost system. And so we have purchased these 2 very large plastic containers that get picked up every week. And they live outside in our carport, which is really just steps from our back door. So when I'm doing food prep or whatever, if I have an empty bowl, we just dump stuff in there. But also I bought these compostable bags from Grove Collective. And so occasionally I just fill one of those up as I'm, I just leave it in the corner of the sink and fill it up and then tote it out there. So it's working pretty well. And then in the spring, there's an option for the residents of this city, maybe county, I don't know, to go and pick up compost for your own garden. I don't keep a compost pile here necessarily because we live on a corner lot and all pieces of our property are very exposed. And so I just don't like the look of a compost bin. I've considered one of the plastic tumblers, but just haven't gone that route since we do have the city pickup, and I feel fortunate for that. So that makes my life pretty easy.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there's so many different ways, all these different stories. This is great. Thanks, Brenda. Let's see, Neely, how about you?
Morning, guys. I recently moved to Minneapolis, so I have a newer experience. But before I moved, I was very grateful to get a free worm compost bucket from Drawdown Society. So they traveled up here with me because they need to be indoors and get a certain amount of brown and greens. So they're doing swimmingly, mating like crazy. But yeah, they need to be at room temperature, and yeah. But since I moved up here, I've been looking for a better means of compost on a larger scale. So I'm very grateful. My roommate's older sister, she's about 5 minutes away. It's a smaller, it looks like the traditional trash bale, but it's just very smaller in size. So we just freeze our stuff the day before and go and drop it off there. But yeah, weirdly, I was told recently by her that they got caught because we do landscaping, putting a bunch of plants in there. And I think Hillary might be right that the scale might be too large. So there are other resources, but I just found that interesting because they do flower clippings. And that's all about.
Yeah. Thanks, Neely. Wow, taking your worms. I just wondered if you've named any of them. Anyway, different story. Let's see.
That would be too funny. But yeah, they double their size every 3 months. They quadruple it. So who knows?
Hillary, how about you? Hi, Hillary.
Good morning. Sorry, I don't have much voice this morning. I don't know. I've been composting for so long, and I send my kitchen waste to Meredith. I guess I'm not sure my son would have ever been housebroken without the compost pile in the backyard. As a toddler, he wasn't very interested in clothing. And so if I was working in the garden in the backyard, he could pee in the compost pile. And I think that's truly, I don't know how we would have gotten past that for preschool without the compost pile.
I think you win so far.
Luckily, he's at rehearsals, so he's not here I'm not in trouble unless one of you.
Mum's the word.
Mom's the word, except it is being recorded, but we're not going to use it, Hillary. Won't be on Facebook anytime soon.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm recuperating from COVID, so I'm.
Oh gosh.
Oh, sorry.
I'm glad you're here, and I hope you just recover real soon.
Well, Meredith, I appreciate you suspending my service while we were sick. I didn't want to send that out to anybody. So that first week when we found out, our kitchen waste went in the trash.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're up and able to speak.
Sorry, I played by all the rules. I wore the mask, washed my hands, everything else. I've some farmers I work with who won't wear masks, but I just don't go near them. And it was a 20-something friend of my son's who thought it was still okay to do Disney princess birthday parties in people's homes. So yeah, I mean, with masks, we could do a lot. Everybody be safe.
Yeah. Take care of yourself. Let's see, Ann Knoll, how are you?
This is the end meeting. There we are. Well, my favorite story maybe is similar to Hillary's in that 35 years ago, I was composting on my farm. We had a barrel partially buried, mostly buried in the ground. And I had my son in a front pack, but it wasn't a new front pack. It wasn't really well secured unless I was standing upright. So I almost lost him in the compost. That's my favorite. That too is my favorite story about composting. Later,
is that a carbon source?
I think
they say so. Yeah.
He's a chemist. He could identify that. Yeah. Later, he and his wife got a tumbler when they were at the University of Illinois, and I remember it was a little bit problematic because they had chickens and they would let their chickens roam in the backyard that they were renting. And I think that tumbler was attracting birds of prey that were circling and trying to get the chickens. So yeah, all kinds of stories with that. I live in a multi-generational household now with my daughter's family, and we're not composting, so I'm getting information. I suspect the HOA rules are pretty stringent, but I'll be interested in what Meredith is saying and if I could transition them to that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think we got everybody but Meredith. We're saving her for last. So what I want to do is I want to start off with a quick screen share, starting our climate conversations, our Indigenous land acknowledgement. So today's Indigenous land acknowledgement is actually the site where Compost Collective takes its compost. So this is Missouri Organics land, and there's this website you can go to. You can go to the usdac.us/native land, and you can put in an address, and it will tell you, it will bring up a map and show you what native tribes were in that area, and you can zoom in and out. And so the area where this land is the historical and traditional home of the Kickapoo, the Osage, and the Sioux native tribes. And I know that we, those of us who are non-native, have a lot to learn from our elders. There's a lot of wisdom there that we're just beginning to tap into. So we're going to have a little more native information during the meditation at the end. And I'm going to introduce Meredith McAllister. So Meredith, we met, I don't know, a year and a half ago maybe, and just by way of various connections with people within the environmental communities. And she was pregnant, had just moved to Kansas City, couldn't believe there was no curbside compost pickup, and was determined to make something happen. And I was so inspired, and she was so busy, and I was so busy just getting the Resilient Activist off the ground. And so we kind of lost touch for about a year, and then Meredith reached back out, and she's on our board of directors now, and she's coordinating our TerraCycle program. So those of you in Kansas City that have, if any of you have any toothpaste waste, old toothbrushes, razors, deodorant containers, if you're a Compost Collective customer, you can just put that out with your compost every week. Otherwise, you can take it to the Brookside Farmers Market all season, and they'll collect that waste and give it to us, and we'll send it into TerraCycle. And we're up to $22 that TerraCycle owes us. Like, I'm so excited. We're going to hit that $25 mark. I can just feel it coming. I know that we will. Anyway, I'm so delighted to have Meredith with us, and I'm just going to turn this over to her and let you just introduce yourself and take it away.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, see, we met, it was almost, I think, 2.5 years ago, because I think I had like just started. And yeah, I now have an 18-month-old at home, almost 19, running around. So life has changed and only gotten busier. I am going to share my screen. Let me just pull that up really quick.
You know what, Meredith, while you do that, I didn't really talk about the Visionary Activist Program. I should do that just a little bit before you jump in. So the Visionary Activist Program is a brand new program that the Resilient Activists just kind of, I just had a message one day, was like, we need to not worry about what anybody else is not doing or should be doing, or we wish they hadn't done. And we're just going to shift into what people can do and who's being uplifted and motivated and driven by whatever's just bubbling out of them. And so that's the Visionary Activist Program, is inviting people like Meredith to come share their stories. We're doing some videos of a couple other visionary activists, and we're going to have, this is part of our Giving Tuesday program. So I'm going to share my screen just real fast here, in partnership with Compost Collective. So if y'all can see this really gorgeous image here that Meredith gifted to us. So Giving Tuesday this year, December 1st, and you can get to the link directly on our homepage, the Resilient Activists. There's a button that says #Giving Tuesday. And if you make a donation between now and then you will receive a PDF with some simple steps to begin your visionary activism journey. And you'll also be invited to a 2-hour workshop, the date to be determined after December 1st, that will help take that visionary activist that's within you to the next level. So it'll be a 2-hour mindfulness-based practice, and anyone that donates between now and Giving Tuesday, December 1st, can be part of that. And then the future is we will be creating programming where people can really go in more depth if they have a project that they're really, really wanting to get going and just feel like they could use a little community support. So anyway, I want to thank Meredith and Compost Collective for being part of that. They're promoting this through their customer base. Any of you that have a business, love to have you promote this through your customer base and what the Resilient Activists offers and what it means to you. So, okay, now I'm ready. Go, Meredith.
Okay, great. Alrighty. So I'm just going to start with my story, and I know there's a lot of words on the screen, so I'll kind of talk through what I've been up to and how I ended up on Compost Collective. So I am what I call a passion chaser, meaning I have a lot of passions, and I want to do something with all of them. So in college, I mean, this started early on, but I will just start with college. I switched my major many times. I'm going to say 6 or 7. It was at least that. While I was in college, I actually started a nonprofit that was like an anti-human trafficking nonprofit in the community.
Can you say that again? What was the nonprofit?
An anti-human trafficking.
Anti-human trafficking. Thank you.
Yeah. Because at the time but at the time that was something I was just really interested in. And so I did it. I gathered community leaders and did it. I love yoga. I became a yoga instructor and leader in that community. And then so after graduation, went into nonprofit management, went into the corporate world here in Kansas City. I was really into wellness and health and yoga. And before Compost Collective, I started a company that was based around holistic health. I wasn't really confident in myself and my abilities of running a company at that point. And so that really didn't go anywhere. And kind of around that time, it was a good time to start Compost Collective. So I did that. So I just want to speak to this idea that I've had a lot of ideas and I've pursued a lot of them. And sometimes it goes really well and sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of pivoting that's involved. And then I mentioned in the Master Pivoter, I had a baby 1.5 years ago. And I was just actually laughing with my husband about this last night. That compost, like the growth was steady. And I swear, I need to look at the numbers again, but like May 1st, 2019, I think things just went, and that's my son's birthday. I think we had him and it was like, poof, company just took off, which was really great. Extremely, extremely overwhelming at the time. So I went from being a passion chaser in the last really few years to being a purpose chaser and understanding your why. So for me, I've done a lot of digging as to like, what am I good at? What do I love doing? And how do I take these passions, these things that I really like and love doing, and turn them into something that's really productive and sustainable? And compost has really fulfilled a lot of those for me. And I think that's really truly what a lot of visionary activism is, because we're all here, we have these ideas, we have these visions of what we would like to do or what we want to see happen. And until we understand that kind of deeper feeling of like, how can I do this? How can I make this happen? What feels good to me personally? That's where we start to really make the progress. So you might have seen some iteration of this graphic of success, of what people think success looks like. But speaking to visionary activism, goodness, this isn't speaking the truth. So we have this idea, this vision. You maybe think that you take a simple action. With Compost Collective, you might think like, oh, we had this idea with some friends, we were drinking, it sounded really fun, let's do LC, take the action, and woo, now we have customers and it's great. No. I mean, yeah, yes, those things all happened in addition to this whole, there's the vision that we took the action, and then there were parts that failed. We redirected. We had new ideas. We had new processes. If our business looks so different than it did 3 years ago from so many failed processes and things that were not going well. And we've pivoted, we've taken more action, and really this is just like one little blip. I know that all of these things, we are not done. I know that there will be failures in the future. I know that there will be new processes in the future, and we will pivot more times than I can even count. And so it's a lot of embracing all of the twists and turns that come with it. So Compost Collective, I actually just realized that I haven't even explained what we do. I know some of you are customers, some of you might be familiar with what we do, but We are a curbside food waste collection company. So you sign up, and every week or every other week, we will take your bucket full of food scraps and clean it out, give you a new one. We also recently launched a bin swap program. So if you heard people mention Suburban, that is really like a pay per swap situation. So rather than the monthly subscription that is what we were built on, we also now you can buy a bucket, and then just whenever you're ready, you just take it to Suburban or a few other places around town, swap it out and get a clean one. So that's what Compost Collective is. As I mentioned, we started a few years ago in 2017. This is my husband and I. This picture is actually really special. This was all of our first customers. All of the buckets fit into the back of our Subaru, and we loaded them all up and dropped them off. And that was what that looked like. I think there were maybe 20, 22 buckets in there. And that was really an exciting moment for us. We now have, with just curbside, we're close to about 1,200 customers across the metro. So a few more than would fit in our Subaru now. Also speaking to this picture, so we were at the Overland Park Market here, just doing some promotion of our business. And just thinking of like how far we've come. When we first started this, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but on the bucket, we have our original logo, which was designed by moi on PowerPoint. And it was really just text with a little box around it with curved edges for a little bit more pizzazz. And then our sign is a piece of paper, was a printed piece of paper of that said logo. We made it work. It was fine. People saw it and they saw our name, and it was fine. It's really sweet to look back on that. Now we actually have a hired graphic designer on board who designed the beautiful Giving Tuesday logo, far more skilled than I am in PowerPoint. And so here in 2020, we, January through August of just this year, we've diverted about 114 tons of food waste from our customers. And we have about 10 employees along with a graphic designer. And we're expanding all the time. We're changing. We are failing left and right and redirecting. I just want to emphasize a lot of the, like, we're okay with some failure because we know that that's also how we grow. So just don't want that to be a bad word as we go along, but that's kind of where we're at. So I think speaking to all this kind of redirection, with as a visionary activist, I think that there are a lot of times where it can feel overwhelming or challenging. And for me personally, whenever things do, which is often, learning to stop and breathe. And for me personally, I've learned this maybe a little bit too late, not too late, but a little bit later in the game, to just go outside and spend time away from everything, without my phone, with email, and just take some breaths and know that I don't need to have anything figured out right now. I maybe need to just take a moment, and that's when things will come. So learning to do that, learning to take that pause and realize that it's all going to work out as it should. Maybe not as I envisioned, but as it should. And I'll put the slide back up at the end. But that's who I am. Okay.
That's great, Meredith. Oh my gosh. So first I want to ask if anyone has any questions before we get into the official interview part. So I've got a bunch of questions to ask her. Anybody have any questions or comments? You're welcome to just unmute yourself and take it away.
Yeah, I would love for this to be a dialogue. I'm very open to everyone's questions and feedback.
Yeah.
Meredith,
Hillary, go ahead.
Oh, not a particularly useful comment, but I'm the person who bought the white Toyota truck.
So our first truck, when we started Compost, we only have one car. We sold our car and got a 2004 Toyota Tundra. This was the first truck I had ever owned. owned. And I was really hesitant to even have a truck, but I was driving down the road, and that truck started smoking. And I remember thinking, what did we get ourselves into? I'm not sure. And this was early on. I do not know. So we got it fixed, and we decided to sell. We around that time we were hiring our first employee, and I thought, there's no way that I can put an employee in this truck. And so we got a little bit newer truck. But when we sold it, there was this lovely person who was making compost tea, which Hillary can explain more what that is. And we thought this was fate. So we were selling the old truck to somebody who's making compost tea. And so this truck that had really helped us start our business, it was literally the reason why we could even start compost, because you can't do it if you don't have a truck. And to pass it off was probably the best feeling in the world, knowing where it was going. So, and that was Hillary Noonan, who makes compost tea.
I'm so glad that worked. That replaced an 88 Ford F-350 that got 5 or 6 miles to the gallon. So I was really grateful for a truck that I didn't pour gas into. And especially when I'm doing this to get sequestration going. But my carbon footprint was absurd with that truck. So thank you. You really helped.
Thank you. No, you helped us in more ways than you know.
So Hillary, can you give us compost tea in 1 minute or less?
Sure. So I've been composting for a very long time, and there are very many different ways of doing it. And you always get something worthwhile out of it. Compost tea is not, you couldn't make it from just any compost. It has to be particularly rich in microbes, and it's complicated to make the compost that goes into the tea. Anyhow, so compost tea brings you a lot of the humic and fulvic acids that you would get from compost, along with a really diverse array of microbes. And so even if you're working with compost that doesn't have much in the way of microbiology, it's a way of getting there. So if I'm putting compost down somewhere and I order it by truckloads, I then put compost tea on top of it to activate it and really get it alive. And it's amazing what it does for plants. It also, when you have live biology in the soil, you increase the photosynthesis rate of the plants that are growing in it. And so you get far more sequestration and cycling of carbon through those plants. If you don't have live biology in the soil, you're not going to get sequestration, and your photosynthesis rate is always going to be really low. So that was way more than a minute. Sorry.
Okay, but one quick question. How do you apply it? Who uses compost tea? Because I think there's people on the call that might not even have heard that term before. So
sure. Compost tea, liquid biological amendments. It all depends on who I'm talking to. If I'm talking to an engineer, it's liquid biological amendments. With homeowners or farmers, it's compost tea. And most of my clients in the city are using it because they don't want to use lawn chemicals. Lawn chemicals are bad news for all sorts of reasons, including the fact that they kill off your soil biology. So then a lawn in itself is not evil. Places with lots of plants, but you can have lawn, and that lawn can actually be a carbon sink if you have your good microbes in the soil. So I have customers in the city who buy it to make the yard look good without lawn chemicals. I have farmers who need it because it changes the nutrient density in what they're raising. It changes the pest problems they have, because if a plant can actually access everything that it needs in the soil, it's not going to attract pest insects to eat it. There are these amazing systems out there, and so this is a way of jump starting that system in your soil which then affects how much water you hold in the soil and everything that grows in the soil. For my clients in the city, I give an equal amount to nonprofits growing fruit for people in the city so that they have that benefit as well.
That's great. Hillary, thank you. And thanks for all you do. So you can just look up, is it Mad Hatter?
Mad Hatter Compost Tea.
Mad
And I'm
Hatter
so
Compost.
sorry. This is supposed to be your morning. I should not be jumping
No,
in here.
it all goes together. This is great. Thank you.
We're part of the system.
Yep. Yep. Okay. So Meredith, is there anything in particular you still want to say, or do we jump to the questions?
No, let's jump in. I think I've given my spiel.
Okay. Okay. So what was it about compost in particular that you said, I'm gonna do compost? You know, this is the company that I want to start. Like, was it something in your background and experience, something you read or someone you connected with, or, you know, what what was kind of the way beginning of this? Yeah.
So we started Compost Collective. There were a few things that happened. I want to preface this all by saying I am not a compost expert. And if there's anything about owning a compost business, that's what makes me the most awkward and self-conscious, is when people ask me how to compost, because I am not an expert. I am a great business owner and an environmentalist, but I am not the person you ask about all of your compost pile issues. However, in 2017, there were a few things. So Trump backed out of the Paris Accord. That was one. And we saw a need for something like this. My husband and I'm originally from here, but we had lived in Boston prior to this, and we were actually members of a service really similar. And we loved the feeling that it gave us. We loved having something so simple and so small of just putting our food scraps in a bucket. And we didn't have space to even try to compost, but we knew that we were making a difference. So when we moved here and we saw that there wasn't something like that, we saw that there was a gap. And we honestly, we wanted to be a part of something like this, and knew how great it made us feel, and thought Kansas Cityans have to want this as well. So we just started a pilot in our neighborhood in Brookside, and put out our feelers of like, would anybody actually like this? Would anybody use this? And 22 people did. And that's kind of really how we grew. It was a very organic, do you think people would like this? What do we think? We're just going to test it out and see. And if we only have 20 customers, then that's great. That's 20 people that are composting now, that are not putting their food scraps in the landfill. All that to say is that it's really, for us, it was about providing a simple action, a simple step for people to take to make a difference. And that's what we really wanted to provide. Yeah.
So you said something I'm going to ask you about that wasn't part of the questions we talked about. Ready?
Yeah.
You said it, and a couple of other people on the call, and I'm pointing to my other monitor over here, you guys can't see that, mentioned how many different ways they've tried to compost and how good it feels. And those couple people who used to compost and now are in a situation where they can't compost, and how it just doesn't feel right. Can you take a moment back through your yoga, meditation, physical, spiritual, in alignment awareness perspective? And when you say it just feels good to compost, what does that mean? What does it mean physiologically and through your heart? And how do you know that it feels good? Like, how are you notified by your breath or your facial expression? Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, even when it's crawdads and what was the other thing? Corn cobs. why does that feel good? You know?
I think there are two parts to that. I think there's a lightness that I feel that I experience when I know that my food scraps are not going into the landfill, not causing harm, and also being turned into compost. So there's a lightness that's like, this is a really small, easy step that actually ends up making a big difference. And I think the second part is knowledge of, like, I know what happens when we don't compost. I know what happens when I throw all of my food waste into the landfill, of how much of the impact that it can make or can have. And so there's just something that's like, this is, and it's physical, it's a tangible thing. Like we can make donations, we can take actions that aren't quite as like physical as like putting your apple core into a bucket is something that you can really see. And if you're the one doing it at home, if you're a home composter, then you actually see in 6 weeks, 12 weeks, that apple core is now compost, which is incredible. I don't feel like there are very many things that are so tangible, like this becomes this, which is really good. So I think those are a couple of things. And even the corn cobs and products turn into really great nutrient dense compost.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So as you developed your idea along with your husband, what flowed really easily and what was really difficult? You know, I'm picturing your sweet image of, you know, all the curlicue steps of, you know, not that straight from vision to action to success. What was really good and easy? What was more difficult?
Yeah. So for me personally, taking really giant big leaps is easy for me. It helped to start this with my husband because we are a little bit of a yin and yang in that way. He's much more of a like, let's pause, let's think about it. And I've already done it and I'm on to the next step. So he's often like cleaning up. What? You did what? And so having those big ideas and just saying like, well, let's just do it. And then the next day I'm going to email the people that I need to email or make the connections that I need to make it happen. And I have, I think I've maybe known this for a while, that that's like a really easy and natural thing for me to do. But more so really as I dig into that in the last couple of years of like, oh no, this is a strength of mine. And that this is something that I need to cultivate, is that if there's, if we're going to, we just decided on a big expansion over a glass of wine sitting outside, my husband and I. was like, no, I think I'm just going to do it. He's like, that's it. You don't want to like run all the numbers. Nope. Feels good in my gut and my heart. I'm going to do it. and I know that that's what I'm good at, is that like fearless jump. And that's what always flows really easily for me is having that next idea and that next, taking that next leap is what, I mean, my heart is like exploding just thinking of it. I love that.
Yeah, you know, it just makes me think of the day you said to me, because you've been on the board for a few months, I think, and we were talking about the TerraCycle program and should we continue to collect the dental waste, and the person who had been kind of coordinating that had other issues in her life. And so one day you just said, well, we should just pick that up through compost, you know, you've got a route, you've got, you know, 1,000 people on your route. And it's like, oh my gosh, how simple is that? And it was like, there was no effort to that idea of just, oh, well, this is the right next thing to do. And it's really simple. And we did have one drawback, was the first big box that you guys collected for us. Would you like to tell that story?
Yeah. So we launched the TerraCycle program, which was great. Seemed like a very natural fit, and it was. I think the first round was really successful. We'll never fully know. So we have all the stuff, and we have one of our drivers is on the route, and he has the stuff to drop off at Sammy's house. And we hadn't really been clear enough of like, maybe take the stuff all the way to her doorstep rather than just leave it at the curb on trash day. And so he left it at the curb and went on his merry way. And then it wasn't really for like 2 weeks, I think, at least a week. And Sammy said, "Were you going to drop that off?" Oh, I think we did. And so I checked back. Yes, we did. And we put 2 and 2 together that we dropped it at the curb on trash day. And so all of the first round of TerraCycle unfortunately ended up in the landfill. We learned our lesson.
Yeah. And it was a pretty big box, I think, probably, I don't know. Anyway, that was a funny story.
We'd be over $25, I think.
We would have put us over $25. Gosh. I just want to say, if this were different times, we would be breaking now. Kathy Miller would have been our hostess with the mostest, and we would have been eating some, sweet food that people brought. Those of you who've come, Hillary and Brenda, and it's kind of, I'm sad that we're not all in the same room together. But
I was just in the kitchen making my hot lemon juice and thinking, where is a baked good when I need one?
Exactly.
Especially somebody
that you didn't have to bake.
That's it.
Yeah, that somebody else baked.
That's the beauty of it.
I would like to, as we get started, I think about everybody's back. Oh, here's Judy's coming in. She said she was going to be a little bit late. I just want to go through the chat box for a minute and be sure if anybody has anything they would like to share. Let me change to gallery view here, or questions from the chat box. So David asked, do you suggest inclusion and expansion of battery compost farming practices? So this is a term I have no idea about. Meredith?
No, I have no idea. And the person that I would actually recommend you talk to or direct this question to is hoping you'd be on this meeting today. Stan Slaughter with Missouri Organic. I would reach out to them. They are, he in particular is extremely knowledgeable about, I'm sure about this, about all things composting. So that's where I redirect that question to.
That's
and then
great.
let us know
Thank
what
you.
you find out, because I'm very curious as well.
Thanks. Hi, Judy. Glad you're here. And so let's see. I recently found out, Neely says that you can't compost plants, and that goes way different from my composting experience and what I do, in that all of my dead plant material gets composted. The soil from my house plants, or when I repot my outdoor pots, goes in there, and so on. So Meredith, do you have some insight about that?
No, I think just reading through the conversation between Neely and Hillary, I think that's probably exactly right. I think that that company is probably, or organization, understanding or limiting the weight of plants is my guess, because I've never had that experience. I know Missouri Organic, where we take ours to, plants are welcome, but it could just be the weight or volume.
The other thing that I've thought about is, because so many people use so many chemicals on their plants and on their yards, and if the compost is specifically intended for food gardens, right, for food preparation, that I can see why you would not want that in there. And I know for me, we don't use any chemicals in our yard, but years ago, my husband and I had this agreement. He could do whatever he wanted in the front yard, meaning use chemicals, and I would be in the backyard without any, because at the time I wasn't aware that an insect could fly, from the back to the front yard. Who knew? And so I was always really careful not to put plant waste from the front yard into the compost bin. And I just wonder if that isn't also a consideration.
I think the question, it's partly a problem of semantics. So when she said she couldn't compost a plant, it's not that it wasn't broken down in the compost. It's that she couldn't put it in her bucket or whatever for the company that picked up her kitchen waste. She could put cut flowers in there, but not a whole plant.
Yeah, which would be the roots in the soil and.
Right. And, if for instance, Meredith took whole plants, like I put cut flowers in my kitchen bucket all the time. But that if you took whole plants, someone would try to put their yard waste, their kitchen compost, and that could become a problem very quickly.
Yeah. For us, we always say, and it's going to be different. There are companies like us all over the country. For us, we say, if it fits inside your bucket, great. If you want to fill your bucket every week with plants, then great. We find that it's probably going to be more effective to fill it with food waste, but more power to you if you want to fill it with your plants. But we're not taking whole yard waste bags.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I think for home composters is if you're doing your compost to use in your vegetable garden, you want to think about maybe not putting in like cardboard and like some other things that there might be some other chemicals involved, and just really keep it with clean compost, right? So let's see. David asks, considered gifting your compost, ? Is packaging and mailing compost an environmentally responsible activity? I love this question. Go ahead.
I think I would maybe suggest if you have a friend or relative that you were wanting to gift compost to that does not live nearby, maybe hopping on the internet and finding a company that does have compost or a farm that you could buy compost from and getting a gift certificate to that farm. I think that might be a more sustainable way to gift compost than packaging it. It is very heavy and dense and wet and would probably not ship well. Good thing is there's compost all over the world.
Cool. And one thing you didn't mention, doesn't Compost Collective have for their customers, they can come get bags of compost, and you have like a Tom Sawyer compost work day or something like that?
So for our curbside customers, we do a compost give back twice a year. So in the fall and in the spring, we give back up to 20-25 pounds or so of compost each season or each time. So that's our little give back that we have. That's how we gift the compost back to our customers.
Sweet. And a lot of our local city governments also have compost where if you live in that city and you produce an ID and a recent utility bill that shows your address in that city, you can go pick up so many bags of compost from the city composting facility. So keep that in mind. Brenda's asking, how do you think the risk taker characteristic that you embody developed in you, like in your background or your childhood?
This one is really fun to answer now that I have a child. Yes, it was definitely present really early on. My dad is an entrepreneur. And I think he really, I got this, I know a lot of it from him, this idea of just doing it, of just taking that risk. And I see it in my son, and we're seeing it more and more. He's such a risk taker, which is terrifying as his mother. The other day he slipped on something and got scared, and it was honestly a little bit of relief of like, whew, okay, so you do have some fear in there. Yeah, it's something that I think I was born with, that I got from my dad, and I've now passed it on to my son. So yeah, no fear,
Cool.
just do it.
Cool. Okay, so then we have, oh, no, I lost it. There we go. Toby's asking, how do you set your pricing?
Great question. So when we started, our pricing was so much different than it is now. And I think part of it was my lack of forward thinking as far as what a company would actually, as we scale, what it would need to include. So we've had to raise our prices quite a bit since 3 years ago. And that's because of payroll. We make a huge commitment and prioritize fair wages for our drivers. So if we look at a list of or a pie chart of how we spend our money, payroll is a huge chunk of it. And we really kind of break down everything, that all of our expenses from there. We have to actually pay to drop off our compost. So we're not rolling in it. We're not. It's a company. We try to break even or make money, but that is definitely not our priority or our number one goal in this. It's really making sure that we treat our employees well and have a really smooth system. So from that's how we set it. That's how we set it, is how we can make that happen.
Yeah, one of the things the resilient activists we talk about a lot is the 5 essentials for a resilient world. And that encompasses reconnect to nature, respect all life, regreen the planet, revamp our spending, and replenish our resources. And so when you're talking about you need to pay payroll, you need to, there's this bigger picture than just what's the customer willing to pay and how much do we want for a profit and where does that profit come from, and the whole people, planet, and profit perspective. That was so alliterative. The perspective of people, planet, and profit perhaps could, anyway, sorry, that was like a joke. Okay. You have to think differently. You think broader. You think about employees. You think about employee benefits. You think about the community that you're impacting, and not just the transportation cost and how many miles per gallon you're getting on what truck, and the fuel usage and the air quality of having a transportation company, but also that giving the compost back and some of the other broad perspectives of respect all life and reconnect to nature and regreen the planet. And it all just kind of ties in together when you step back and think about it as a business owner.
Yeah. And our services we know that they're not accessible to everyone. And that's a decision that, it pains me. I would love to have it be really, really inexpensive, and I understand it's not. But it's at the exchange of, I want to really pay our employees well, and I want our business to be sustainable. The last thing is if we weren't charging enough and we had to quit everything, and that would be, then there's no benefit for anything. So we're constantly looking for ways that we can provide a more accessible business. And our bin swap is one of those ways, because it's a much cheaper option. We're constantly looking at how we can be more efficient overall, and then also being really transparent about what else is out there. You can drop your compost off at Herbivore Farm for free. Yes, it's taking that extra step because we'll come straight to your door, but if your budget is tight, that's a really, really great resource in Kansas City to be able to take your food scraps there. We don't want to have, if our cost is a limiter, then we want people to know that there are ways that you can still continue to compost. You can start a home compost for really inexpensive. You can, and Sammy, you were the one who actually told me about this, and I'm gonna forget the name of the website.
Sharewaste.com.
Where you can connect to other home composters. So if you're in an apartment or you're unable to compost, then you can find somebody who is looking to take in food scraps. So we want to put that word out there of like, yes, we do this, but there are also other people who are doing this. There are other ways to do this for free or for a lot less.
Yeah. And so the sheer waste piece is pretty interesting. I just want to share a story with a friend of mine who was part of the planning department in San Francisco. Lived there for a long time. You know, there was no problem composting. Everything and anything, anytime, any place was really simple. And then she moved back to New York City, and she lived in an apartment and couldn't figure out what to do with her compost and couldn't bring herself not to compost, right? She just, how do I not compost? I can't live like that. So she would save her compost up in her freezer. And then Sunday mornings, just at sunrise, she would put them in a bag, in a backpack, get on her bicycle, drive to the city compost facility and throw the whole thing over the fence. And so, you know, it's like, once you get it, right? Once you get it, you really want to make it happen. And I think that you're having that in your mind. When I heard your one bin, what is it, like $6 or something for a bin? It's like
per spend, $6 per swap. Yeah.
Okay. It just sounded so simple and so open to a wider audience, you know, that didn't necessarily have the funding. So thank you for that. Okay. Kathy Miller asks, how do you give back so much compost when you have to pay to drop off your waste?
So we budget for it, and it's actually, we found a way to make it a little bit less expensive for us. It's really something that we prioritize from the beginning. It's like, this is it closes the circle of you're putting all of your food waste, you're giving it away, we're taking it all. And this is a way that people can actually think, oh, wow, this is my food. So we really prioritize that from the very beginning. And we really actually this year, we started bagging it ourselves. We started taking, rather than having Missouri Organic bag it for us, we just get it in bulk, and we have a little volunteer day and bag it and then drop it off. And then we don't over order. So we open up, we have like a little form. So we only get what we need to get for our customers, but we just prioritize that expense from the beginning, and it's pretty small.
Yeah.
So if I don't want it, I wouldn't get it back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't garden. Yeah. Okay.
You're not required to take it back.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what am I gonna do? It's 25.
Although you could give it to a friend, right? Or someone that you know that gardens.
Someone would need it.
Yeah,
I've picked up bags and given them to people who have a little garden area in a community. It's good to start recycling. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. David says, best wishes, best regards, much success to you and your endeavors. That's so sweet. How would you suggest people politely recommend composting?
I mean, I think that, I hope I'm understanding the question correctly. But I think understanding the importance of composting, I think, is really a key in telling other people about it and why you should. When we started, we were at a family gathering and we were talking about this company that we were kind of in the process of starting. And my cousin said to me, she's like, well, why on earth would you do that? Why would anybody pay you? Like, people are paying you? I'm like, yeah, it's a subscription fee. They pay us every month. She's like, well, you can just throw all of your food scraps down the drain. Like, yeah, you can. That is something people do. And so it's understanding, like, well, that's causing wastewater, and that's not a good thing. And you have to run your disposal. And so there's energy that's put into that. And when you throw it into your trash, how it emits methane and how that's so much worse than carbon dioxide. So understanding the facts, I think, really helps you tell other people about maybe why they should try it, or recommend a service kind of like ours, and understanding what the why behind it, I think, is really the most polite way that you can talk to people about it.
Yeah. I know for me, when I first heard, and someone correct me if you know this is not the right statistic, but that 40% of the Johnson County landfill is food waste. Mm-hmm. And I just did a quick Google, not on that, but on this website, RTS, I don't know, but Food Waste in America Statistics, 80 billion pounds of food is thrown away each year in the United States. And so whether it's just the leftovers from what you were preparing for soup, or it was that bag of apples that you bought and you only ate 3 of them, right? Or it was the food after you had a prepared meal, and then you have the waste from that, the leftovers from that. That's a lot. 40%. 40% is a whole lot in our landfills.
And that doesn't even factor in what stores and restaurants discard from what they can't use because it's expired or because it's simply not what they want.
Exactly, Brenda. And there's a lot of great organizations starting now. There's like After the Harvest, which goes to farmers, and they collect a produce that's just a little bit after what the farmers can sell at the farmers market or to restaurants, and that's distributed to needy areas. There's that ugly, what's it called, ugly fruit or ugly produce or something. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of organizations out there recognizing exactly what you're talking about. There's an organization that goes around to restaurants and picks up day-old bread and produce that can still, all those tomatoes that can still make great tomato sauce, but can't show up on a really nice sliced, platter of sliced tomatoes. So there's organizations building up around the whole sector of food waste.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Yeah, it's all right. In the United States, we fill up the Rose Bowl Stadium in Pasadena, the equivalent of the Rose Bowl Stadium, every single day in food waste. So at the end of the day, just imagine that being emptied out into the landfill and fill it right back up again. And it's a whole system, and there are issues with the entire system. And really the bulk of it comes from at the farm of produce not being pretty enough and then being left in the fields or discarded, and then at grocery stores where it has the sell by date, or it again isn't pretty enough, and so it's picked over. Our goal, and it's really overwhelming. I'll start by saying that it can be very overwhelming. The food waste field it's so much deeper. It's just like one, tiny little part of a really big, messy system. And I I think this actually kind of ties into the resilient activist too. Like we have decided that in order for us to be the most successful is to pick one area. And for us, that's residential at your home. What can you do? So yes, we have the food, we will take your compost away. We also have really tried to create as much information and share as much information on how to even prevent your food from making it into our compost bin. So thinking of Thanksgiving, if you're peeling your potatoes, you can rebake your potato skins and have them as like little chips. So we have a social media, an Instagram post about that. If you are having a turkey, make sure you save the bones and you make stock later with all the other vegetables, all the onion and celery and all those other vegetables that you had prepped. Our goal is to not, is to really limit the amount of food that you're even having to put into the bucket. To not use our bucket as a crutch of like, feeling good, it's going off, but how can you use your food, reuse your food, and then maybe it ends up in our bucket. And that is, I think, one of the ways that if we just start to change the way we think about how we eat our food, that's where we, I think, can be the most impactful, and you can actually understand what you're buying, what you're eating, what you're throwing away.
Yeah,
On that note, somebody asked me what the most, like what, if there's one thing I can do, it's eat the food that's in your fridge. Eat your leftovers.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yeah, I love that. And there's one thing for those of you that this seems a little new to, so if you have a banana peel and you put it in your compost, that's going to break down to its nutrients, to its original, all the sun that it absorbed, all the water that it drank, you know, all the, whatever happened with that particular banana is going to come back into the soil so that it can be watered by rainfall, and then that nutrients can grow more plants, or it'll evaporate into the air, and it's that whole cycle, right? But if you take that banana peel and you put it in your trash, even if you don't put it in a plastic bag, right? If you put it in a plastic bag, you know that it's never going to decompose. Let's say you put it in your trash, and the trash people pick it up and it goes to the landfill. And all of that trash gets compacted and piled. Like you've seen the mountains, right? If you've ever driven by the Deffenbaugh facility over at 435 and Holiday Drive, so kind of on the, what is that, on the way west side of town, there are mountains. They create mountains of this trash. So you have all this weight, and what you have in that area is an anaerobic setting, meaning there's no water going to get in there. There's no air that's going to be able to help that decompose. There's no insects that are going to be able to live in that environment and help decompose that. So that banana peel is no different going in the trash than that piece of plastic that's going to go in the trash. It's all going to stay there, right? Forever, as far as we can figure out. So it's just one other awareness of the implications of putting food waste in your trash. The whole concept of, you know, first do no harm is like, anyway. So let's go back to, we have, Judy has a question. Do waste pickup companies such as compost, I think you mean, really recycle your yard waste, such as grass sticks, plant trimmings, etc., that you put in the recycle bags? Oh, so that would be, you guys don't pick up yard waste, correct?
No, there are a couple companies. Compost Connection does Nature's Rubbish, I think is another one. And yes, they do. I know that some Compost Connection, their yard waste ends up at Missouri Organic, and they are absolutely turning that. They're composting it.
So, and when I mentioned different cities, so I know Lenexa, Leawood, Olathe, Overland Park, when they pick up, like if that's your curbside collection company and they pick up your leaf bags, they take them to their compost facilities, and that's where you can take your utility bill and go pick those up, you know, once a year, however often. You have to take your own containers. It can be a bit of a mess, but yeah. So Judy, I think you can feel pretty comfortable about you're putting your leaves out, and whoever says they're going to pick them up, they're not going to put them in the trash in the landfill. Okay. There,
But
Ann has.
on that note, you can always call and ask. You can, if you're uncomfortable or aren't sure, you can always ask where your waste is going. Those companies should feel very comfortable telling you what's happening to it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks. And thank you, Ann Melia, for the Johnson County solid waste. So it was food is 26% of residential and 20 of commercial. So it was a little lower than what I thought, but it still seemed like a huge number when I think about that. Let's see, Anna Grather, you said, Meredith, you always have lots of ideas. How did you focus in on one idea to implement? And that's the challenge she has, deciding which all of these challenges in the world is the best fit for me.
Good question. I'm sometimes not sure I actually did pick one. So I did start a company before this that really, as I kind of mentioned, I didn't really feel confident in myself or abilities, and it didn't really go anywhere. And this one just kind of stuck. I also will say that this isn't going to be the one. This is my first company, but I know that this won't be my last. So for me, I think that it's doing it. It's finding, and that I kind of actually hate when people are like, just do it. Well, there's so many things to it, but taking that first little step, asking people around you if you started this one thing, would they be interested? And oftentimes it's that first, like, if I can get other people on board, then that's my accountability. Like, okay, well, now I have to do it. And whether or not it goes beyond those few people, that's one thing. But at least you can take that first step and include some people. And then also knowing what you're good at and what your gaps are, and finding somebody to fill those gaps in. So as I mentioned, I'm really good at the ideas and the big picture, but I need somebody to help with those small things, those logistics, okay, now tell me exactly how you plan on doing this. Somebody to question me in that way is really important. So those are kind of the big, finding people around you to make you accountable, and then also knowing where you need support.
That's really such great advice, Meredith. And it's actually a little bit of the resilient activist and how that started, where I had this idea. I didn't know what it was really going to look like. And I just went through my contact lists, my business contacts, my yoga student contacts, my personal contacts. And I had 3 criteria. I had who has a deep nature connection, who participates in, either receives or offers some holistic practice, right? So it could have been, yoga or, healthy food or whatever. And then my 3rd criteria was, who did I enjoy being with and whose opinion would I respect? So that did weed out a couple people. And so I just went through and I came up with 60 names, and I had a couple focus group meetings, and Kathy's nodding her head because she was there. And it was for me the exact right way to do it, because I knew who was with me and I wanted their opinions. And so there are a number of people from those original focus groups that are still actively involved in the organization. But it gave me the credit, not me, it gave the concept the credibility that there's a whole lot of people that think this is a cool idea. Like, this is important to do. So,
Tammy, could I just add though?
Yeah.
You were inspired. That the inspiration has to come before all of that detail that you guys are describing. there has to be an inspiration prior to that.
Right.
What is it that you love? What is it that your experience has brought you to want to do? I mean, there's got to be something before contacting people and seeing if the idea is valid and all that. That I think that's what I hear in Anne's question, although she can certainly speak for herself.
Yeah, I think that that's exactly true. You have this idea and then you talk to the people around you and you say, what about this? What do you think about this? And you kind of get their feedback. And but you have that idea first, and then you kind of say, get the feedback. And there were certainly people, I have a distinct memory of being at the yoga studio and asking some people, I was like, what do you guys think about like a house, like a residential curbside composting? And it was blank stares. And when you're really early, when it's still an idea, it's kind of like daggers to your heart. Like, well, maybe this won't be successful. Maybe this won't, maybe this is all, this idea. And so there's also a little bit of tough skin, I think, in some of it. And like really listening, like, no, okay, nope, I can do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to keep doing it. And we posted something on Nextdoor, the neighborhood website. And that's how we really started, was asking our neighbors, would you be interested? Once you post something like that, you can't take that back. You can't say, just kidding.
Just kidding.
But it's a lot more awkward to say, hey, we're starting something. Do you want to be a part of it? And then you have people that say they are. Okay, I guess we'll do it.
Yeah. And Kathy, you bring up a good point, because before I contacted all those people, was working through something called the passion test with you on really refining what it was that I wanted. And so our visionary activist program is all about that, coming from a very mindful perspective of really honing what it is that's just bubbling up, and then what's the first step and the next step that you want to take. So thank you for that clarification. I'm going to answer one question. David asks, are newspapers compostable? And actually, Meredith, I'm going to let you answer that.
Yes, we'll take them. I'm not sure if anybody's done it in home composting, but we'll take them.
Yeah, in home composting, you can, from my experience, you can do the newspaper part, but you wouldn't do the ads and the slick stuff. So, and styrofoam packaging, there's a company in town. If you go to the site Zero Waste, the Facebook group Zero Waste KC, and you ask that question, someone will tell you where you can take it. There's a place, I think it's in KCK, where you can take your styrofoam, but don't do it until you have a whole carload, because otherwise you've got a whole different environmental impact. All right, we're going to, it's about 10 till, we're going to do a little 5-minute meditation, which those of you who know me and have been coming know that this is really a short meditation. But it's actually, I'm going to be reading you from Blue Highways. Blue Highways is, it's a book by William Least Moon, and he is Native. This was his first book, and it's where he was going through a really difficult time in his life, personally, and just decided to get in his car and drive. And it was about a 13,000-mile trip, only on the blue highways on the road map, right? So they're the little tiny 2-lane roads. And I'm going to read you, thinking in terms of, by the way, this compost bin that you see is artwork by Jonathan Bryce Lyman. So I just interviewed him 2 days ago, and he'll be his visionary story as an artist, creating this glorious compost bin with this hand dropping compost into that beautiful bin. You guys are going to love his interview. He blew me away. Anyway, the whole point of the compost and composting is not just the intellectual piece of closing that loop, but living within the loop, living within the real deep understanding of our relationship to the food we eat, to the soil, to the air, to everything that's involved. So I'm going to ask everyone to please mute yourselves and get yourself in a comfortable space. So just be sure your hands are supported. They can be interlaced in your lap. Really ground yourself through your hips. Let your feet be very solid on the ground, and then find your alignment. With an inhalation, feel that sensation from the tip of the tailbone as you inhale, all the way up through the spine, back of the neck, the crown of the head feels as though it's just lifting to the sky. Take a full inhalation, a full exhalation. Let your mind meander to your personal connection to the earth and the soil, the sensation of food preparation and the texture and colors and the odors, the aromas that come through as you're preparing your favorite meal, the movement of your hands and your fingers and your arms as you reach and gather and sift and cut and chop and stir. You find yourself visualizing how it feels to be part of the food that you eat. And I'm going to begin reading. He's in Montana, east of where the muddy Milk River begins rubbing its back against the highway. I stopped again, climbed a fence, and walked out to a pair of rusty boulders that an ice sheet dropped on its northward retreat. Stones like these the Indians carved into billboards, scorecards, boundary markers, prayer books. I hoped for a message from the first people, but the stones sat as featureless as the land. Back in the truck, I fired my little stove to heat water for coffee. I threw in some cocoa for energy and sat and watched and sipped. The prairie was blowing and gray, interrupted here and about by the white faces of Herefords. A century ago, the Sioux tribes, the stone boilers, and the big bellies who hunted bison on these plains, found in those descendants of the mastodons a four-legged grocery, hardware, and dry goods store. For generations, the people stalked buffalo and dried and pulverized the meat and mixed it with bone marrow grease and wild berries and packed it in buffalo skin bags. The pemmican lasted indefinitely and had 10 times the nutrient value of fresh meat. Tanned bison hides gave the Sioux shelters and bedding, moccasins, leggings, shields, boats, buckets, even vessels to boil food in. Horn and bone gave spikes, drills, knives, scrapers, axes, and spoons. Ribs and jaw bones provided children with snow sleds. The hooves furnished glue, the scat heat. When a Sioux finished with a buffalo, he had used all of it, even its spirit, for it was the bearded buffalo, alive and dangerous, weighing nearly a ton, snorting and short-tempered, that stood at the heart of the rituals and religion of the Plains Indians. Taking a full inhalation and a full exhalation, remembering your connection to the earth, the animals that populate it, to the plants that provided food and shelter and shade, and remembering the ancient teachings that everything in nature is of value. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is trashed. And with your next breath, visualize yourself back in the kitchen, the texture and the colors, the aromas of the food as you prepare, the movement and motion and activity of your hands and your arms, your eyes. And you remember that in light of your deep connection to this ancient wisdom of the connection to our land. And with an inhalation, I invite you to set your intention for finding the ways, one small step at a time, to live your everyday life coming from this perspective, remembering how this feels to know your connection to all that is. My deepest gratitude for joining today. Gratitude to Meredith for being guided by her heart. And gratitude for all of you for stepping in and wanting to make a difference. It's all so valuable. And then taking a full inhalation and a deep exhalation. And very gently opening your eyes. You come back into the room. So I'm just going to ask Meredith if you have any words of wisdom, any closing remarks that you'd like to share.
I think my biggest thing to share is that every small step counts and should be celebrated. And I think especially as we go into this week for preparing meals, knowing that every time you make stock, that's a step. Every time you go on a walk and look at the moon and take a second and appreciate, that's a step. It does not have to be some really big step forward, but acknowledging and taking those little steps and celebrating that, and celebrating your impact that you're doing. So that's all. And thank you.
Thank you. Wow. So
Thank you both.
You're welcome. Does anybody have anything? Let's see here.
One thing to remember, if anyone else does go down with COVID, that meditation can really help you keep your oxygen levels up. It can keep you out of the hospital.
Thanks, Hillary. Yeah, actually, you know, I have our Sunday meditation is on our website. It's on, you go to the homepage and there's 3 pictures there, and one of them says the word meditations. I have 21 weeks pre-recorded and a guiding through a beginning meditation course, and also on Insight Timer. If you get that app, and that's all free, you can have a number of Yoga Nidra and deep nature connected guided visualizations on that. And I want to end, go ahead.
One quick thing, if any of you don't know and have never listened to Sammy's meditation, you need to go there as soon as you can. It's fabulous.
Thank you, Judy. You'll get your $10 after the
Thanks.
I'm going to end with one quick screen share, and I'm going to just invite you all to go to the Resilient Activist website. Click the button. It's right below the big picture, right below the quote that says the world needs inspired visionary activists to see us through these difficult times. And there's a button right there that says #GivingTuesday. And I just invite you to be as generous as you can and invite your friends and family to support us because we are all volunteer. We have goals and dreams of having major funding, and that's going to happen. But at this time, to be able to bring you these kinds of programs and continue with what we're doing, we would really appreciate your financial support also. So, anything else?
Thank you.
All right. Great community. Thank you all. Go have
Thanks,
a
Sammy.
wonderful holiday. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.